Hello and welcome everybody to this XTB live news. My name is Walid Koudmani, market analyst for XTB, and in this video we're going to be talking about the main events happening in the markets in this final trading session of the week, today Friday the 2nd of July 2021. Very interesting day today in the markets, lots of moves, and we had an interesting week as well. So let's take a look at the markets, let's take a look at the charts and see some key levels to keep an eye on and some major moves. And let's start with a recap of what happened today. Today was NFP day, so the non-farm payroll report was released from the US, which is one of the most followed macro reports showing the change in employment from month to month in the US. So it's an indication of the US economy and its health, and the NFP is very closely followed not only from traders but also from the central bank. And so that's going to be the interesting part next week, seeing how the US central bank does react to this positive news. So what we saw, in fact, as I said, was a better than expected reading for the NFP, contrary to last month, and in fact even ahead of the reading from the ADP, which is the private version of that, which came out this Wednesday. So the NFP was expected to show an increase of 700,000 jobs last month. In fact, it showed an increase of over 800,000, and the markets reacted positively to that, as I'm going to show you on the charts, and both with the S&P and the US 100, so the Nasdaq, reaching new all-time highs. But another interesting thing that's happening is the developments around the OPEC meeting. So the OPEC meeting, which I mentioned at the beginning of the week, would take place this week, where a change in output was going to be agreed upon, with an increase that was going to be agreed upon. But we actually saw that there were some hurdles on the way, and in fact some troubles reaching a deal between Russia and Saudi Arabia, and which has delayed the meeting, in fact, and has allowed, for the moment being, oil prices to still remain in their current ranges, as I'm going to show you. Other than that, as I mentioned, not much rest for the rest of the day. We had some US data besides that, some Canadian data as well. And next week is actually going to be very interesting with the FOMC minutes, as any sort of mention of a tapering or a QE change or fiscal policy change could really have an impact on the markets, as we've seen in the past with just some comments from several central bankers, which maybe in the past would not have been followed that much, now seem to have a much wider impact than before. So let's move on to the charts and take a look at what's been happening today. So let's start with the DAX, as always. DAX, which is in an interesting situation compared to the US indices. In fact, most European indices are in this situation. You can see the DAX still trading within a range, 15,444 points and 15,744 points almost. But obviously breaking through on the top side as well sometimes. At the moment, the interesting part is that while US indices are reaching new all-time highs through positive sentiment, we are actually seeing some pullbacks here and there and some more volatility in the European indices, which, for a variety of reasons, we've seen this in the past as well. But the interesting thing is that the DAX still remains stuck in its range for the moment being, and it's going to be interesting to see if it's going to be able to break through, or if it's going to remain, or if it's going to be heading for the lower limit while US indices extend their gains. For the moment being, the RSI is almost at the oversold range, although it's still at 42. And as I'm going to show you on the US indices, there is some positive sentiment in the market, so we're going to have to wait and see what happens with the DAX as well. US 100, Tech Index, Nasdaq reaching new all-time highs already, as I said, breaking through the previous short-term range. So this was a situation that was occurring on several markets where they were trading in a range and tested both the lower limit and the upper limit, as you can see here, twice, and several other times on the lower limit, and then breaking through the higher limit for the moment being. And it was a situation similar to what we saw in the past as well. US 500, so the S&P, closing higher 8 out of the last 9 days. So if you saw on the if you're in the WhatsApp group, you've seen the message that we've sent, and closing higher 8 out of the last 9 days, or 9 sessions rather. And we have to see today's, but although today's session seems to be so far green and positive, so still all-time high, new all-time high every day for the S&P, and it's going to be interesting to see if it actually does continue that trend or not. On the other hand, let's talk about gold and commodities. Gold, which has been struggling as the US dollar has been strengthening itself, but at the moment attempting a recovery on gold after bouncing around 1755. You can see at the moment trading and testing the higher limit or the upper limit, which was tested in the past twice at 1795 very briefly and pulling back, and currently now trading around the lower limit of the Ichimoku cloud on the H4, so the 4-hour time frame. And you can see how narrow this range is. It's about $50 or so, or $40 or so, about 2% from top to bottom. And you can see that at the moment, even though the trend is heading upwards, it did test the top limit, the upper limit, call it resistance in the past, and is now has not reversed its direction, but is now testing this area around 1784 and 85, which if I draw a rectangle here, you can see basically is where most of the price reactions were happening in the past before this lower drop. And then now we are still in that range. So it's going to be quite the range for gold as well to be attempting to break out of. But let's put on top the USD index, so USD IDX, and you can see that the mirror or the moves are quite symmetrical. So you can see that as gold pulls back, the USD index is pushing. Well, probably it's the other way around, but we are seeing that at the moment the index is pulling back, allowing gold some breathing room as well to recover. But other commodities like oil, so oil, this is Brent, you can see at 75.40, 75.50, also trading in range, closely, not really approaching yet the lower limit or the upper limit of the Ichimoku cloud, but also managed to reach a new high of 76.73 before pulling back. So we saw that the main concern was going to be the talks of the OPEC meeting. However, since that increased production has not been agreed upon yet, oil prices, as you can see, are still trading sideways for the moment being. It is going to be interesting to see how any sort of impact from potential cuts or potential actually increases in production is going to be received by the markets, especially as I've mentioned in the past, considering the Iran deal, which could bring back several 2 million barrels per day, and voluntary cuts that are also ending soon. So it's a very fine balance with oil where on one hand you have the demand, which is uncertain at all times at the moment because of the pandemic and the lockdowns, and on the other hand you have the suppliers, which are trying to not overflood the market but also not create a severe supply deficit where the prices could potentially increase because of lack of supply on that end. So this is definitely something to follow, the news regarding OPEC and how they're going to address this issue. WTI, on the other hand, also similar situation to Brent, but pulling back slightly at the moment, approaching more the Ichimoku cloud, 74.65. As I've mentioned in the past, the spread between the two has been narrowing consistently, and at the moment it's basically, so you can see 74.70 almost, while Brent is 75.40. So it used to be around $5 spread or even more. Now at the moment it's less than $1. And then finally, let's take a look at some currencies. So with the market analysis section, we can see Euro, USD, mixed performance today. The pound slightly more negative. The franc is slightly mixed, while the New Zealand dollar, Australian dollar, and Canadian dollar are all quite positive, along with the South African rand and the Mexican peso. But if we take a look at some pairs, we can see that pound USD, very negative performance as of late, except for this attempted recovery around 140. But you can see that this was a pullback, which then led to a continuation of the downward move that we saw from the very beginning after trading around 142 for a significant amount of time. But as I've mentioned in the past, and as you just saw, the USD index and the US dollar has been very, very volatile and fluctuating a lot lately based on the several factors, including the central banks, which we've mentioned. So pound USD around 137.7, lowest level since April, basically, at the moment. And you can see that the pair actually dropped by over 1.4% almost, currently trading around this area, attempting to return into the previous range. Going to be interesting to see how, again, they're reacting to the banker speeches and the bank's policies. Euro USD, on the other hand, which I'll show you with the USD index chart, Euro USD, similar situation to the pound. You can see this huge drop from 122, 121, currently trading over 118.3. Testing 118, never breaking below it, but still trading at the lowest level in quite some time. So you can see lowest level since also April. And you can see that if I do put the USD index overlaid on top of it, you can see that a lot of it is US dollar strength and US dollar basically movements that are pushing markets, both commodity markets and currency markets, of course. Of course, it's very difficult to predict if this is the pattern of the future. This is not something that always would happen or always does happen, but it's important to see if the correlation is there or if there are some moves that are happening in several markets at a time. So if all markets are down against the dollar, perhaps it is dollar strength. And in fact, you can even see some mirrored moves here on this end. So let's touch on the US dollar index very quick. You can see US dollar index still moving higher, especially compared to this lower range around middle of May, trading at the highest levels since April. So that's what we're seeing at the moment. US dollar strength, gold weakness, and some oil uncertainty at the moment. US indices reaching new all-time highs. This is what we are looking forward to heading into the next week. So hopefully this video was useful. I hope you have a good weekend. Best of luck with your trading. Thank you very much for watching. My name is Walid Koudmani. If you enjoyed the video, leave a like, subscribe, and I'll see you next week. Thank you very much.